Our story starts in the Annapurna region of Nepal. On Valentine's Day 1996, two young backpackers met in a guest house in Gorapani. Mandy from New Zealand and me, Lee, from the UK. That chance encounter would be the beginning of a long and happy travel life together. We'd both started trekking on the Annapurna Circuit trail, a footpath that links village to village and goes up into the mountains of western Nepal. Mandy was trekking with a friend that she'd met in Pokhara, and I was with a friend that I'd left the UK with. The trail is narrow and the villages are small, so you soon form groups with other travellers. This is what we did, and soon our group was heading up together into the mountains. We passed through some beautiful villages and admired the amazing scenery all the way up the Kaligandaki Valley. We got as far as Muktanath, but we couldn't cross the Thorung Pass because it was completely snowed out. So the group turned round and trekked back down. Some flew out from Johnson, but the four of us decided we would trek back down the same way we'd come in. When we rested at the beautiful Tatapani hot springs, romance had been building in the air, and Mandy and I kissed for the very first time. It was Leap Year's Day 1996, and we'd be together forever since. We'd fallen in love with the mountains of Nepal, so we decided to extend our visas and go to the Everest region. There were only two options to get there: fly to the Lukla airstrip or take a bus to the roadhead at Jiri. From Jiri, it's a grueling 9-day walk across the passes and valleys of the lowland Himalayas. This is the route Hillary and Tenzing took in 1953, and is the best but most challenging way to get to Everest. There was a problem though. Mandy had lost her passport somewhere along the Annapurna trek and had to send to New Delhi for a new one. Us lads went ahead, while Mandy and a friend waited in Kathmandu, not knowing if we'd be able to meet up again. When it came back in 3 days, they realised they could catch up with us somewhere in the mountains. So they sent notes with trekkers up the trail to let us know they were on their way. We received most of them in remote mountain villages and sent notes back. Before the internet, this was the messenger service of the day. The girls power walked the trail and completed it in a record 5.5 days, overtaking us and then finally meeting at the entrance to the Sagarmatha National Park. We were reunited again. After a rest in Namche Bazaar, we decided to take the trail up to Gokyo to get a view of Everest from a different perspective. The tea houses en route were very simple and the snow was deep, but the spectacular scenery was well worth the effort. In total, it took us 28 days to walk in and out of the Everest region, and boy were we glad to have a hot shower when we got back. Mandy and I went on to backpack through India together and to spend the rest of our lives, to this day, slowly travelling the world. In 2017, 21 years later after we first met there, we finally made it back to Nepal. We wanted to revisit some of the places and some of the people that we had met, and we had unfinished trekking business. We wanted to complete the Annapurna Circuit this time, and we wanted to trek to Everest Base Camp. So we flew into Kathmandu, took a bus out to Pokhara, and then another bus to Besi Sahar to start the Annapurna trek. The Annapurna Circuit circumnavigates the Annapurna mountain range, best done in an anti-clockwise direction. Starting in the lowlands and crossing the Thorung Pass at 5,400 metres, this trek would take us 18 days at a leisurely pace. Our first few days were hard going as we were getting used to the heat in the lowlands, and we soon realised the weight of our backpacks was too much for us, so we shared some of our load. But this was a great way to acclimatise and experience peaceful village life en route. The trekking lodges were so much better developed than they were 21 years before. With Wi-Fi, comfy beds and good food available, we felt very comfortable. The road on this side pushes all the way up to Manang, and there was a constant stream of jeeps heading up the trail. We crossed deep valleys and wide open alpine plains as we trekked higher and higher. After crossing through some beautiful landscapes, we made it to the high village of Manang, where we would stop and rest and get used to the altitude up here. We're staying and resting for a while. That's the village, perched up on the ridge there. It's pretty impressive. The mountains surrounding.
and then looking down the valley into the sun, unfortunately.
It was a good opportunity to climb some of the nearby hills and admire the beautiful snow-capped peaks of the Annapurna mountain range that surrounded us.
Coming around to Gangapurna, and the Gangapurna glacier dropping down below, where we'll be heading in 3 days' time, crossing that pass just to the left of the peak over there. Just left Manang and we're walking slowly up to Thorung now, following the valley north. It's just pretty special. Mandy's got a stick, so she's happy.
We were getting even higher now, and huge vultures soared overhead. And this was high enough to be yak territory, where these beasts of burden grazed the barren land. It took 2 more days to trek up to the high camp just below the Thorung Pass, through more spectacular mountain vistas. We'd stop in simple tea huts for warm food and drinks to keep us going on the tough trail.
Annapurna 4. I've just walked up a very steep path down below us, down there. Might be able to see a yak herder's shelter. And we're making our way slowly up to the top. And there's Mandy. How are you feeling, darling?
Very good. Excellent.
Excellent. We're heading up to 5,000 metres today. And then up to 5,400 metres for the Thorung Pass tomorrow. Going well. On the hill above Thorung High Camp. It's at 5,100 metres, and there's just a bit of a panorama of the snow-capped peaks around us. There's a glimpse of the Himalayas. Pretty impressive, Annapurna over there.
Once again.
Just came up from down there earlier, and we're off across the pass tomorrow at 5,400 metres. It's all good.
We set off in the early hours of the morning to hike to the top of the pass. It was cold, dark, and incredibly grueling hike. Probably the toughest that we've ever done in our lives.
Mandy on our way up Thorung.
Tiny steps.
Nice and slowly. It's pretty steep. We've come a long way from down the bottom.
Oxygen's about 50% down at sea level.
Yeah, it's tough. And we've still got a long way to go. Up to the pass ahead. Nearly there, Mandy. How you going?
Excellent.
We're about 5,300 now, hopefully. And maybe 100 and a bit more to go to the top of the Thorung Pass, which is between that peak and that peak. There's a crazy Canadian guy.
It's all just so quiet.
We're so close to the top. So close.
And after a mammoth effort, we finally made it to the Thorung.
Just so beautiful, so barren. This is the other side of the Thorung. We're heading down now to Mukdanath. The place we ended up 21 years ago.
After 11 hours on the trail, we rewarded ourselves with a stay at the Bob Marley Hotel. That wasn't there last time we stayed. It was all downhill from here, across the windswept gorge to Kagbeni. This was familiar territory to us. After a night in the comfortable Hotel Shangri-La, we made our way back down the Kaligandaki Valley, walking along the dry riverbed and fording the river at times. The road is slowly pushing its way up here, but it's tough going on the buses. In the village of Tukache, we sought out the old guest house that we stayed in 1996. It was wonderful to meet up again with the owner, Mr. Tulachan, who's now in his 80s and lives in it as his home. In typical Nepali fashion, he welcomed us with open arms and sent us away with bags of his apples. This final section of the Annapurna Circuit was just a trail when we first walked up here in 1996. It's now a road, so most trekkers normally skip this section. But we wanted to retrace our footpath, so we braved the traffic. There's no doubt the new road brings economic prosperity to the people further up the trail, which is a wonderful thing. But the impact of it here makes the trekking hard.
Just crossing another suspension bridge, one of many. There's Mandy there. This is what we're surrounded by. Pretty nice. Yeah, the wires looked a bit dodgy on this one, so I'm not going to hang around. I think it's time to get to the other side.
We finally trekked to the Dalagiri Lodge in Tatapani. This is where our relationship began on Leap Year's Day 1996. It was quite surreal to walk through the gates and see little had changed. However, at the beautiful hot springs where we first kissed, it was no longer the peaceful, natural environment. We still bathed in the hot water and relished our memories together. Our final stop on this walk down memory lane was Gurupani, where at the Dalagiri Lodge we'd first met on Valentine's Day. That had had a massive upgrade and was no longer our style, so we found a cheaper lodge down the road. We finished our hike after 18 days on the trail, satisfied that we'd finally completed the Annapurna Circuit. Next stop, the Everest region, so we took a bus called Rockstar, and he drove like a complete and utter maniac on the mountain roads all the way to Paflo.
You alright?
I've got to say that Mandy wasn't very impressed, and she made sure, on the way back, we took the much safer Jeep option.
You'll be fine. Don't look down, that's all.
In 1996, Jerry was the nearest road head to Namche Bazaar, and it took 9 days to walk there. Now the road goes all the way to Paflo, which means it's only 5 days to walk to Namche. It's the best way to prepare for Everest. You strengthen your legs, trekking in, and you acclimatise your body to the altitude nice and slowly. The trek goes through beautiful lowland valleys that is far off the beaten track, as most trekkers fly into Lukla and join the trail further up.
There you go, easy, you smashed it. Well done, darling.
Here you'll see traditional village life as it's been lived for centuries. And friendly local people will make you feel welcome in their tea houses and guest houses. The traditional ways of living are still very strong here. This is one of my favourite parts of Nepal, unspoilt and unaffected by mass tourism. Tea house life is wonderful, and the welcome always very friendly. Away from the road, it's only trails that lead from village to village, with prayer wheels and chortens marking the way in, and porters carry impossible loads to supply the villages and guest houses further up the trail.
Getting higher in Selakumbu towards Lukla. There's a plane coming in. He's actually below us at the moment. He's going to land Lukla airstrip, which is just to our right. There's a helicopter. There it is. Got a red thing dropping down. That's the airstrip. It's just behind the yak train, plodding along. Do not want to get stuck on a bridge with these guys. If you do, you're in trouble. Believe me, it happened to us.
In 1996, we stopped in a guest house in Pakding and had photos with the family and their bouncing baby. We rediscovered the guest house and found that the baby has now all grown up and is studying in Canada. The family were overjoyed to receive photos of their son. It turns out the father, Dorje Sherpa, is a high-altitude mountain guide. He wasn't present in 1996 because he was on Everest with the IMAX team, and he assisted in the rescue operation during the 1996 Everest disaster and saved lives on the mountain during that treacherous event. Next was the entrance to Sagarmatha National Park, where Mandy and I reconnected in '96.
Crossing and heading up to Namche, which is up there. Crossing the Dudkosi, which is down there. There's another bridge down that way. Pretty spectacular.
This honestly and truthfully is freaking insane. See the two suspension bridges? And the river all the way below. Beautiful, but crazy.
Right.
It was great to be back in Namche Bazaar, which has seen its fair share of development in recent years. We found the Sunsight guest house where we'd stayed all those years ago. Then we set off on the trail. The plan was to trek slowly and visit Dablam and Chukung Ri before trekking up to Gorak Shep and Everest Base Camp. The first port of call was beautiful Tengboche Monastery, which we could see had certainly benefited from tourism. Then we carried on to Tengboche.
There's a suspension bridge in Nepal. Absolutely awesome, these things. The river down below, fair flags. Looking on Valley, Dablam in the distance. Heading up there to base camp there tomorrow. Should be pretty good. Everything here is just on a massive scale. Very, very, very impressive.
Over in the distance there you can see Tengboche and Namche Bazaar in the distance where we've come from. Today's the day we're walking up to Dablam Base Camp. So we come around. We have to go higher for some of this. And over here, stunningly enough, the one in the background with the smoke is Everest, and the one in the front is beautiful Lhotse. And here is awe-inspiring Dablam.
A side trip to Dablam was well worth the effort to stand underneath this awe-inspiring mountain.
So this is the base camp at Dablam. There's mountains behind here. Unfortunately it's hard to get it all into my video. Yaks, can you hear the yak bells? Ah, love the yaks. Some more tents here. 50 apparently. All to conquer this beautiful mountain, Dablam. I've just realised this wall is completely made of yak dung. They leave it there to dry or something. Yeah, fuel for the winter. So there you can see that's yak dung. and stones. Amazing, that big pile there.
It's also worth a side visit to Thorung. Here it's high and it's cold, but if you climb Thorung Ri, you'll be rewarded with one of the most spectacular views you can see of the Himalayas.
Climbing to the top of Thorung Ri, it's to the left up there, panning round towards Lhotse's south face. Brutal mountain that is. Everest is behind it, and then panning round towards Island Peak, Burunse in the distance, and coming around to Thorung, the icefall, and Dablam ahead. Thorung's down below, where we've just walked up from, and Mandy's just approaching from a long slow path. It's tough. We're going to 5,500 metres, and it's just absolutely amazing. The north and the Khumbu Glacier will be heading up over the next few days to Everest Base Camp. It's just around the corner to the right there. That pointy one's Primori, and then coming up, Everest is hidden behind this ridge. Namche. In front of me there, and he's taking a rest down there, and then coming back round to the valley that we're staying in up Thorung, Island Peak and Burunse. The Imajou Lake Glacier coming down. It's just pretty spectacular. We walked up from here this morning. There's Dablam. We're staying below it in Thorung. Going back down there now. We're about 5,400 here, and it's amazing.
It was another 2 days of hard yakka, trekking over the boulders and the moraine of the Khumbu Glacier up to Gorak Shep. It's over 5,000 metres here. The air is thin and the weather is cold. The water even froze in our bottles in our room overnight. Gorak Shep is the last village before Everest, and from there it was a few hours more hard walking to finally get to Everest Base Camp.
Avalanche.
Avalanche person approaching Everest Base Camp.
Quite a big one too. It's going to make the Khumbu Glacier. I'm glad I wasn't in the way of that.
12 days after starting this trek, and 21 years after our first attempt, we'd finally made it to Everest Base Camp. We were exhilarated.
We finally made it to Everest Base Camp. There's a lot of other people that have made it also, and that's where they get their photos, by the flags. There's no tents here at the moment because it's not the climbing season, but this is the mountains you're surrounded by, and this is the famous Khumbu Icefall where so many people have died. It goes round there to the right, up there, and then that's Namche behind, and you can just see Everest poking up behind that ridge there. That's Everest behind it, and then coming round, beautiful valley with some amazing peaks. Just an absolutely stunning place. We're actually sitting on a glacier at the moment, and Mandy's down here having a little rest. It's been a long walk. We're both very tired, but it's been well worth it. We just love this place. It's amazing.
The next day, after a cold night in Gorak Shep, we climbed Kalapatar. At over 5,600 metres, it gives you a bird's eye view of Mount Everest.
Made it to the top of Kalapatar. Finally, such a tough walk. There's Mandy, she's just got over here too. Behind her is the Khumbu Icefall and the great Mount Everest. There it is, the big boy. Panning round. The sun's coming up there. And down the valley. Okay. So Dablam in the distance. And the Khumbu Glacier. And then panning round. Mountains on all angles. There's us at the top of it all. Well done, Mandy.
This will be our last major view of Everest. We've got Namche and other beautiful peaks. As we're heading back down from Kalafata down to Gorakshep to begin the trek back to Pangboche and to Namche Bazaar.
It was another 2-day hard walk back to Namche Bazaar. Mandy had injured her knee, so she hobbled all the way. But after 2 10-hour days of walking, we got back to Namche in the darkness. After 4 days rest, it took us another 5 days of walking to get back to Paflo. 23 days of hiking in total. We'd come back to Nepal and we'd achieved our goals. This place will always be dear in our hearts. It's not just the beautiful landscapes and the breathtaking scenery that make Nepal such a special place, but for us it's the people that we've met along the way over the years. The smiling faces, the welcoming hospitality, and the kind hearts that have touched our lives. We were finished for now, but I'm sure one day we'll return.
This is dried buffalo meat, and they spice it up big time. It's hard work eating it, but it's really good.